Joey DeFrancesco, how are you doing?
I'm good, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing very well. You know, considering the circumstances. Before we started rolling, you were saying that this is the first time that you've been home for this long for 30 years.
Yeah, because I'm 49 and I 17 was when I did my first, I started going on tour.
Hmm.
So, it's a minute ago. And it's really nice to be home. I mean, I just wish it wasn't under these circumstances, but it's nice to be home and enjoy the house and, the stuff that we work so hard to have and be able to be here for more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. So how's your family?
Everybody's cool. I feel very fortunate, blessed on both sides. My wife's side, everybody's good, man.
That's great.
What about you? Everything's cool?
Yeah, everything's cool. Knock on wood. I actually, yeah, nobody in my family is sick. Um, Everybody's healthy. Everybody's, following the rules and all of that. And
That's all we have to do.
yeah,
That's what we have to do.
yeah, that's something that I've been constantly telling my students, or
Hmm.
trying to uh, friendly reminders of, okay, are you following the rules? Are you following the rules? And they know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Because um, I think kids still tend to think that they're sort of immune. And
Hmm.
the thing is even if they are immune, other folks that they may come in contact with may not be.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So, all right. So, so on your Instagram, all over the place, and I feel like I've experienced this vicariously um, through Doug Lawrence. Uh, your
Mhm.
saxophone playing, man. I'm seeing you uh, playing saxophone. But it's like half of the videos or something that I see on Instagram, or you playing saxophone. Um, and so your grandfather played saxophone.
Yeah, my grandfather, he was a reed man. He played all the reeds. At that time you had to play it. Well, you play all of them too, but he was playing tenor. I think was his baby. You know what I mean? But he
Right.
played clarinet and alto and soprano and baritone, and but he was. I think the multi instrumentalist thing comes from him because I was told that I knew him. I knew my grand. He passed away when I was 8 years old, but he wasn't playing much by that point. He was like 90 years old,
Right.
but very coherent and everything,
Mhm.
But he he was a musician that people said like if he got a call to play trumpet on Thursday, he'd have it together on Wednesday. Like the union, he was like, yeah, and he played guitar and violin. He was just a bad dude, musician wise. But I recently got, and but the tenor I think was his reeds were his love.
And you inherited a horn from your grandfather? Is that how this sort of started?
Yeah, my dad, still had my grandfather's tenor, alto, and his clarinet. That was what my grandfather kept from all the stuff that he had, everything. But those were the three things that he kept. And about say 2 years ago, it's almost no, I guess a year and a half ago, November of 2018, to be exact. I decided I want to start now. Let me be fair. About 25 years ago, I picked it up for about 2 weeks, tenor,
Mm.
right? And I started getting around. Like I got a sound right away,
Hmm.
and I start, because from listening to, I love saxophone first of all. So those sounds, it's like if you decided to play trumpet and you love Miles or you love Clifford Brown as a musician, that's in there. So it's gonna like it goes here and then to the heart and then out, and you kind of make it happen, right? But you got to figure out how to do it first.
Right.
But Okay, so that many years ago, and then I put it down. I figured out some of the fingerings, whatever. But uh, in 2018, I recorded a record with Pharoah Sanders,
Hmm.
and being around him and hearing him, and that sound right in front of me, it made me want to start playing tenor.
Hmm.
So I said, "Hey, Dad, I want to play. I want to play tenor." He said, "You really gonna play it? I mean, you gonna like get into it?" I said, "Yeah," and I would love to have Grandpa's horns. And he laid them. He said, "Okay, if you're gonna play them, they're yours."
Hmm.
So I had to play them. You know what I mean? And
Right.
he had to bet. His horn is the tenor is a Kahn New Wonder too, a Chew Berry, gold plated, just beautiful. You know, beautiful horn. And so that's what made me want to start playing. And and I got the horn, and I just went crazy after that.
Well, you sound great. I mean,
Oh man,
you know,
thank you.
you really sound great. But I mean, I knew that was going to be the case as soon as I found out that you started playing saxophone.
That means a lot though, man, because you're so great, man. Like what you do and the teaching stuff. I'm starting to look at some of those videos, man. There's all kinds of hip things to learn. Stuff that you have on YouTube, and you play so great. And we did that gig with the Basie band together.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna bring that up as like a Chicago area, right? Like a suburb of Chicago or something.
Yeah, New Tier High School or something
Yeah,
like that.
that's right. That's right. I was trying to call that to my memory, and I should know that because I know some folks that are from that high school, um, uh, and some folks that have worked there, and I
Mm-hmm.
just I just couldn't call it to memory. But yeah, that was great, and of course it was the first time that we played together.
Yeah.
Um, of course, I know your music very well because I've been a fan of yours since '92.
Oh man,
Um,
thank you, man.
yeah, so '92, I got a record. It was a CD, Reboppin',
Oh yeah.
and that's when I first got into you. And you're playing trumpet on that record, and you're doing, and of course the organ playing is ridiculous. And right then and there, I was like, man, this is a guy, I want to deal with. Um, I mean, I'm trying to think of. I mean, there are some great organ players. I interviewed Bobby Floyd.
Oh my man. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 for this series. And interesting thing is, Bobby Floyd played in a band with my dad.
Whoa.
Because, yeah, because Bobby's from Ohio and my dad is from Columbus and everything, and so my dad is older than Bobby, um, but they played in a band together. And when I moved back to Columbus, I was born in Columbus, but
Mm-hmm.
then my dad's job moved us up to Michigan.
Okay.
And when I moved back for the job at Ohio State in 2004, I had pretty clearly established in my mind that I was going to play with Bobby as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And he had, his jam session and everything. Talk about just a good person who is a great, great, great keyboard player.
He's
Incredible.
phenomenal. Yeah.
Just really incredible. I'm trying to think though of the known organists. I can't think of someone that is more known than you. Like when people say jazz organ, of the living organ players. I mean, you're the guy, um, and I'm thinking. I mean, at least in my mind, and with the guys that I went to school with, I mean, we were all about Joey D.
Oh
We
man.
were all about Joey D. So I wanted to tell you that you've been I've been a fan of yours for a long time. So
Oh man. Thank you, man.
and I appreciate you coming on the program, and we're gonna we're gonna dig a little bit into what made you Joey D.
All right, figure that out.
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about, growing up and, what was going on in the house? What kind of sounds you were hearing? There's some other musicians in the house that you were, influenced by, maybe some early mentors and teachers,
Mhm.
all of that kind of stuff.
Well, growing up in Philly was great, and it's kind of interesting because my family, my mother and my father, and I have a brother and a sister. They're all from Niagara Falls, New York,
Mm.
right? The Buffalo area, and and then my father, my father's an organ player, Papa John DiFrancesco, and he started playing organ. He was a trumpet player first, um, and he heard Jimmy Smith and he forgot about the trumpet. That happened to a lot of cats. Jimmy turned a lot of cats, man, in the '50s. Because
Mhm.
that sound was something so incredibly different than anything
Yeah.
anybody was doing on the organ. The way he played it, I mean, he set the standard of how we play the instrument. Everybody, whether it's in the church, whatever it is, the way he established, of the way, it's like Art Tatum or something like, or Bud Powell or Bird. I mean, after Bird is like, there's a lot of stuff, but I mean, you could stop there,
Right. Yeah.
So, so anyway, so my dad decided to play the organ, and my mom bought him an organ. She went out and got him an organ for his birthday when they were first married, man. She started this mess, man. And he taught himself how to play the organ. And I think that was around 63, 64. And he stayed in Niagara Falls, Buffalo area and played there, which was a great circuit. There was a lot of organ clubs and, hip spots to play. And then he also had a day gig, and his day gig brought him to Philadelphia. And then I was born in Philly in 1971, which is pretty interesting. It's almost like it was written because that's the lineage of this style of organ playing is from Philly, because Jimmy Smith is from Norristown, which is just outside of Philly, and because of Jimmy Smith, Shirley Scott from Philly, she heard the sound of Jimmy Smith, wanted to play the organ. Jimmy McGriff, Groove Holmes, Charles Erlin, Trudy Pitts, they're all. These are the cats that established what we're doing. And then I was born there. So I got to be in that lineage of the organ thing, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. What were the chances of that? So I'm a strong believer of things are meant to happen, So, and then in my house, the music was all, like all the Blue Note records were there. We had all the hip records. And if it wasn't straight ahead jazz or that kind of stuff, it was James Brown or, the Jackson 5 or, just all hip music, man. Sam and Dave. But the thing that really got me interested to play, really was 50s R&B, man. Like
Hmm.
Fats Domino, Little Richard, which isn't far from what we're doing anyway. I mean, the same concept. Those cats were swinging,
Right.
And because I was a little boy, I was watching cartoons. I was about 4 years old. And I'll never forget this. And one of those 1-800 commercials came on, to buy somebody's greatest hits record, and it was a Fats Domino record. And I heard that intro, Blueberry Hill. I
Mm.
don't know why, man, but I still get goosebumps when I hear that. It's so soulful. And I was a little kid, and I picked up the phone and I dialed that number and ordered that record. I didn't know about you had to pay for it or whatever. And UPS comes to the house. You have a COD. You remember COD, cash on delivery. And I remember it was $12.88. This is like 1975. And my dad was like, "What is this?" I told him, "Well, it's a record I ordered." When he found out what it was, he was so happy because that was so hip that I wanted a Fats Domino record. So that's where it started for me. And I had a toy piano. just that my mom and dad bought me when I was a kid. So I started playing, like Fats Domino on this toy piano because the organ was always on the gig. The organ wasn't at home because my pop had a steady. They used to have these gigs, man, where they would play in the joint for 5, 6 years. You'd move the organ in there, and that was it. They would play, In fact, the club that my dad was playing in at the time, he could walk to the club. The gig was like, he walked to the gig, man, and walked home at night, So I started to hear, and then he had a hiatus from the gigs, and the organ came home. And at that point, I hadn't seen the organ. So now this big, massive instrument with 2 keyboards and the drawbars and all this stuff on it. A little kid, like, whoa. And then he turned it on and started playing it. And then I started hearing like, oh man, that's what I heard like on that record, and Jimmy Smith, because I liked the sermon. I really loved the sermon, that record.
Mm-hmm.
So I just fell in love with the instrument, man. It became my favorite toy. And when my dad would go to work during the day, I was putting the sermon on and learning it. And I learned it note for note, the whole thing, man. Like, it took me about 2 weeks, and I learned the whole thing. And my pop home from work, and I was playing that, man. He was like, "What?" And that's how it started, man. And we had all that great music in the house. So like everything was there. It couldn't have been a better situation for me,
Yeah, that's it makes a big difference. And when I'm talking to all of the folks that I've interviewed and musician friends and everything, that
Right.
we talk about like our home life and what got us into music. It's pretty similar. A lot of the critical factors that set a musician up for success, that separate them from others. There's certain factors that seem to be present. I started when I was 6. My dad was a saxophone player. Was a great saxophone player. I got 3 to 4 lessons a week with him. There's a lot of practicing, and a lot of listening, a lot of ear training kind of stuff. He didn't call it that. It was all about having fun,
Right.
all of that. And the music that was in the house, my dad had a 9 to 5, so most of the music that he would put on, which was more like jazz stuff, Blue Note stuff, Miles, all of the stuff that all of the great music.
Right.
Plus, my dad had a record company, and he was producing sort of like R&B, so kind of Motown styled R&B. And so there was a studio in the house and equipment and stuff, and when I got old enough to understand what's going on, he's showing me that stuff, and it's real easy to fall into it and fall in love with it when it's so present in the house, and you have support, and people are pushing you and telling you what the next thing you should be dealing with is. It's like an unfair advantage.
Really. It is, man. And that's exactly very similar situation. The difference was, and maybe you were like this too, like my dad he would point me in the right directions. He knew I loved it and I was having a ball with it.
Right.
I mean, my parents used to have to tell me to stop.
No.
You probably went through that. Yeah, like go ride your big wheel or something. Like,
Right.
You're in here, but you don't understand. This is my favorite toy.
My dad told me, I actually interviewed him for this same series, and I interviewed him because there's a lot of gaps in my memory. Like I don't remember a bunch of stuff. I don't remember what he had me practicing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And those are pretty common questions I get. Students ask me those questions. So I was trying to fill in some of those gaps for myself. And one thing that he told me was, like he would have to hide the horn from me. He said, go outside, go do something else, because he was concerned about me becoming like a weirdo, basically. like
Right.
some really myopic, kind of kid that has really no social skills and stuff. And so he wanted to make sure I was doing other things. And but yeah,
But you still, no matter what, wanted to be on that horn.
oh yeah, yeah. That, I mean, that's it's. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
like
the
that.
only thing. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do. I mean,
Me
I,
too, man.
I would totally be. I would be totally lost in. I would be so miserable without music. Just the blessing that it is.
Absolutely, man. Well, and that was the same. Like that would be like punishment for me if I did something bad, which was rare because I was a pretty good kid. But if I did something, who knows? You're not allowed to play the organ. That was like the end of the world. So I made sure I was cool all the time so I could play.
You know, and I was thinking about this. My son is 6, and
Oh,
his name's Moses,
really?
and Moses is a regular 6-year-old, and
Mm-hmm.
he's rough, and he wants to wrestle and tickle fights and all of the kind of rambunctious kid stuff. He's really um, he's very competitive. Like we'll play like video games, and like he wants to win all the time. If he doesn't win, he gets
Yeah.
upset.
Uh-huh.
you know. So, but he's like a. But it's at this point it's pretty benign. Benign. If it gets too out of control, then we'll have to have some conversations. But there's a bunch of instruments around here. There's a set of drums here. There's he's got a P trumpet. You can
Oh,
kind of
nice.
see you can kind of see it. It's blue right there, um,
I see it. Yeah.
and he's got a guitar. But he doesn't do anything. He just he thinks it's time to hang out with me. So then he comes down and, oh, here, let me beat on the drums for a little bit, or let me here, oh, hey, can you tell me the names of the strings again? We'll go through that every once in a while.
Right.
But and I don't want to force it on him or anything. The stuff is here, and if he ever wants to do it, then it's here. But I'm saying that to say there's something quite unusual about someone like yourself or someone like I was when I was a kid that would make us want to spend that much time doing that particular thing. It's like it's ordained, like music chose us.
Yeah, definitely.
Music chose you.
It was
Do you
written
feel?
that
Yeah,
we were going to do that.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Because, I mean, there's no other way to explain it because it's just not, not to sound, it's not the norm, you know what I mean? And
That's not.
there's, I mean, I liken it to, though, the way I was always able to deal with it was like a thing that I say is it was my favorite toy. I mean, it was a video game, I guess,
Right, 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 right.
but it's different because, like you put a lot of work in, you put in a lot of time in, but like you enjoy it. I mean, I didn't do. See, you did a lot of things though that I'm sure that were like necessary. Like my ear was so good, man, which I know yours probably was too. But I never became a really good reader. Like I didn't read at all for years,
Hmm.
because it was so easy for me to hear stuff and play it that I became lazy. And I did not, man. You put a piece of sheet music in front of me, and then I wasn't having fun anymore, and
Mm.
I didn't dig that. So, and I went to Settlement Music School, in Philly
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, and I started taking classical lessons when I was 10. And like the teacher would, I never practiced my lesson because I didn't want to do that. I wanted to play, and she got wind of me quick because I'd ask, well, how do you phrase this? Like, can you play this for me so I can hear how to phrase it? And she'd play it, and then I could play it, So, but she figured it out, like you're not reading this, you're not practicing, And my father, that was the one thing he thought I should have probably done a little more. Looking back on it, I wish I could, but I didn't. That wasn't. That's the difference. Like, I just don't learn that way. I couldn't learn that way. It just wasn't comfortable for me. I don't know if it's a lazy thing at that time because it was too easy to do to do it the other way. I don't know, because there's a lot of cats that, like yourself, that do both. That are like great readers and great ears and improvisers, and you have perfect pitch too.
I don't have perfect pitch. Do you have perfect pitch? I was going to ask you that
I
question.
do.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you that. Bobby Floyd
Whatever that
has
means, anyway. You know what I mean?
Bobby Floyd has perfect pitch.
Okay.
I interviewed another keyboard player. He's also a great singer named Dave Powers,
Hmm.
and he works at Ohio State. He has perfect pitch. One of my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding. Named Doug Pierce, great composer, arranger, and great trumpet player. He's got perfect pitch. I know a number of folks that have perfect pitch. And it's actually been um, a significant point of interest. I want to do a panel discussion at Ohio State sometime where I have some folks on the panel that have perfect pitch and some that don't, so we can kind of dialogue and talk about the difference as far as perceiving notes. What the notes are. Now, I don't have perfect pitch, but if you play any note on a saxophone, flute, or clarinet in particular, but other instruments too, I can tell you what note it is without a frame of reference.
Right.
And
But I mean, that's what I mean. It's a fine line with that, man.
it's a timbre thing, though. Like,
Mhm.
saxophone is not uniform. So, like, certain notes are really open sounding, and in some notes are sharp, some are flat. Some it just sounds different. The
Love,
notes are coming from different places on the
lovely.
horn.
It's lovely.
But
Yeah.
but I can't do that on a keyboard instrument. So an
Uh-huh.
organ or something. I mean, I know the general range that the note is in, if it's in the middle or the top or the bottom of the instrument, but
Hmm.
I can't hear the I don't know what the note is,
Okay.
which is kind of an interesting. It's kind of an interesting thing. You were talking about just being able to hear the notes and being able to go to them. If I mean, I don't know. Reading music, I think, is important. Um, it would be particularly important for a certain kind of piano playing. Like if you're going to be a concert pianist, or if you're going to be a like an MD for musicals or something, then I think it would be pretty important. But for what you do at the level that you play, for the style of music and stuff, I don't know how. I've actually wondered about this, because I wonder sometimes if seeing things notated will slow people down.
Definitely.
You know what?
Me. You know.
But you understand what I mean, though. Like
Yeah,
if you
definitely.
know what something looks like, and if you're sort of developing your playing based on what you think something might look like, it might actually eliminate a bunch of possibilities, because you're thinking, maybe you're thinking in a box, you know.
Maybe it's
I don't
interesting.
know.
Well, it's just like the notes on the page. It still blows my mind though. Like when like I can write music. Now, thank goodness for computers now, and I could play stuff in.
Hmm.
And it makes a chart. Of course, it's not exactly right, because if you lay back a little bit or something, but somebody like you, if I have somebody like you in the band, I'm straight, because you'll fix all that for me. You know what I mean? But I've gotten better at it. But like, it amazes me how cats can just play that though. They play it down like that. And a lot of the musicians that I admire, like, I had the pleasure of playing with a lot of great, a lot of our idols, like Miles, right? And Miles can read, man, because they came from that school. You play in the big band, you learn. They didn't play around. You had to know. There wasn't a lot of that going on, I don't think, back then. Like, why just self-taught? I mean, I'm sure cats did, but if you talk about Train or Dizzy or or Charlie Parker, they all read like, they could read like crazy, man. You know? Now later on, you know, like speaking of Jimmy Smith, he couldn't read at all. Wes Montgomery couldn't, you know, but listen to the way they improvise, man. You know, and I don't think it's important to learn how to play this music. If you have the ears and you can, if you have ears and a natural ability, because there's some natural ability too. Mm-hmm. You don't start playing certain things and hear them when you're 4 years old if there's not some other kind. That's that ordained thing that you're talking about.
Right.
And want to do it like crazy. And then, of course, when you're younger and you get into something that young and it's working, you're wide open, right? Your mind is clear. You're not worried about paying any mortgages or anything, right? So you're wide open for that. Right. So,
right. You can do it for all the altruistic reasons.
Yeah, man. So that makes it like super hip when you're 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old and you want to learn something.
Yeah.
But you know what, for me, where it would get frustrating is you know, if I'm in my world, in my box, I'm fine. But if I have to go do a record or a session and they put a chart on me, you know, now I don't have to worry because I could say, hey, man, send me a tape or let me hear it before, you know, and then I'm cool. But if somebody, it's very rare anymore that you're going to go in the studio and somebody's going to put some intricate chart without you checking it out first, right? Mm-hmm. So, but, you know, years ago, it wasn't like that. And I got a whole story about that, like when I got the call to go do the gig with John McLaughlin. John writes some serious stuff, man, you know, and the music is crazy. And when I got that gig, that was in 1993. And he sent me a thing of charts like this, you know, and it just looked like this to me, you know. I couldn't, and he didn't send any recording or anything. Mm-hmm. So here I am, you know, with these charts. I got to go to Europe, do this gig. We had 4 days of rehearsal, and then we were going on the road. So I fly over to London, you know. I'm 22 years old. I'm flying over, you know, first class. Everything is like right, you know. It was like a great gig to get. And I get over there, and I get to the rehearsal. Dennis Chambers was on drums, who doesn't read either, but drummers can really get away with that, you know. So we get to the rehearsal, and John says, okay, what do you want to start with? What did you look at? I said, I didn't look at any of this because I can't read this stuff, man. It's like I could read by that point, but I could read a lead sheet with some chords, not, you know, like this kind of stuff, without having some kind of reference to listen to it, especially, right?
Yeah.
He says, you don't read? You know, and a lot of people assume when you got a lot of technique and things like, and you could get around an instrument that you're some kind of like heavy duty, classically trained reading fiend. A lot of people get that perception, you know. No, I just assumed by the way you play that you could read. I said, well, no, not like this, you know. So I said, well, just do this, man. I'm like stressed out now, right? Because there's a lot of music I got to learn. Tough. And he wasn't lenient about it. Like he was like, he wanted me to play these melodies with him in unison. And that was that. And you know, like the changes, no problem. When it comes time to solo and I'm straight, you know. So I was like, well, man, if you just play the melody, no. Okay. Yeah. I said, all right, well, then make a tape, play all these melodies, and let me go to the hotel tonight with a keyboard, you know. And I was up all night, man, in tears learning this because this was some hard music. It wasn't just like, you know, it was hard original music that he wrote. But I learned it, man. I was up all night and I learned it. So, you know, but it helped me read a little bit better too, you know, like looking at that, listening to it. And I would write the notes under each note. So I would, you know, like real elementary school stuff, you know. So then, you know, it just got, I kind of skated all through high school with that, with the big bands and stuff, because my ear, I could hear stuff, you know. And I was with Christian McBride, you know, he's one of my best friends. We went to high school together, right? So I would ask him, man, what's, because he's one of those can read anything, you know.
Mhm.
So anyway, that was how I got through, and that's how I got through that gig. So if I could hear it, now I'm even a little bit better now to read about like that much better. But send me a recording and I'm straight.
It's an interesting thing. Something that I've had a number of students that have had challenges that way because they had so much natural ability. They could hear anything and they could play anything, but their reading skills just really were lagging
Uh-huh.
behind where practically anyone else would be if they had half the amount of natural ability, because they would be forced to have to develop that. It's just kind of um, it's actually a pretty common thing, especially amongst really talented, like folks that have a lot of natural ability.
Right, right. It makes you
And
lazy, I think, in that regard. Or not, it's just not fun, you know?
well, you know, I'm not sure. I wouldn't characterize it that way. I
Uh-huh.
just think I think if something is working, keep doing it. And what reason do you have to do something different? Um,
So what do you
so
tell those students like that if you got a student like that?
well, the approach that I've used is um, if I can get sheet music for stuff that they already know,
Ah, there you go.
so then you can work the other direction. You can work backwards. You can say, okay, well, you can play the snot out of this. This is what that looks like,
Ah, yeah.
you
See?
know, and and enough of that, because I'm a minister of music at a church,
Hmm.
and it's a missionary Baptist church, so, and um, some some folks read, some folks don't. I have to approach it from a more of a holistic, kind of thing. Some folks are going to have to approach it from listening to it first. But either way, everything's notated. So I've got a Dropbox. All of the stuff is in there. All of the recordings are in there. So if somebody wants to learn,
Hmm.
they have access to it. And that's pretty much been my approach. But I would have made the same assumption. The only reason that I knew before this interview, the story about uh, not reading as well, is because you said it in an interview. I watched it. I watched another interview that you did. That's the only way that I would have had any idea that you know, uh, I mean, that is you admitting it. That's the only way I would know that, because you play so much stuff, and I'm thinking in my head, how's it possible for this cat to play all of this stuff? you know,
Well,
um,
it's like people talk about transcribing, but see, I just transcribed here.
right,
You know what I mean? And because I think that's how you should transcribe anyway, to be honest with you.
right,
You should. I understand why you do it, and some people get into it and write it all out. But really, what I think happens if you transcribe with your ear and your memory is you wind up playing something that what you thought you heard. It's going to come out a little different,
mm,
which is cool too. But like if you listen to something over and once you learn the instrument, you get your ear together anyway, you're going to start figuring out how to play stuff you heard anyway. I mean, if you work hard enough at it. But there's something really cool about learning stuff without writing it out because you never forget it either. That's the other thing is like
right,
I've never forgotten a piece of music since I started playing. Because
yeah. And that's that whole oral thing.
right,
One
yeah,
thing that you know, there's an aspect of the academic thing
hmm
that I resist, and and it's I think it would be pretty easy to turn sort of jazz in the academic setting into basically swing and classical music. if you understand what I mean,
Absolutely.
where there's more emphasis put on the note on the page than there is on consulting the authority, the recording,
Right,
you
right,
know? And in our music, it's all about the primacy of the oral tradition. It always overrides everything else. I don't care. I mean, it's kind of like, now this is, this is just common sense. This just makes sense. But often it's the case that people, students of mine that have read a transcription and then they listen to the recording and then they're playing the transcription, and for the most part it's happening, technically it's together, but then there's some discrepancy with notes. And if is some discrepancy, who do you think is right? The page or the recording?
the recording.
Of course it's the recording.
Where,
Of course it's the recording.
yeah. No. Well,
But it's easy to get locked in because you're just, it's like a different part of your brain that starts to override your ears or something, and that's never a good thing.
yeah, definitely. And but it's fun. I love to teach though. It's a lot of fun, for all the different things. I mean, I have a very abstract way, I'm sure, of teaching and explaining things. I know what everything is for the most part now, from being around cats and being around cats like George Coleman, and, and be able to ask him what this is and what do you call, you remember all those things, or Miles or Hank Mobley or Philly Joe, they knew, Philly Joe knew his harmony, man. He was a great piano player, So, so it's fun to teach too. And I really enjoy that. I've been doing that, an online thing for about 3 years now. And, and I've got a lot of students. I add new content every month.
Yeah.
So I'll play a tune, I'll break it down, I'll talk about it, or I'll say, okay, specifically certain things about playing the organ too, because there's a whole other technique of certain things you got to know too to get the sound proper. Because there's a lot of guys that can play, but the sound that's coming out, there's a lot of technique. The way you use your expression pedal. There's a lot of things that I break down in there, and that's fun. And harmonically, I love to be able to show people things. Break it down with the keyboard, and really it works for anybody. I mean, obviously you could teach, once you learn an instrument, you could teach people concepts about improvisation and harmony to any instrument, right? And then playing other instruments, it's opened up my ears, like playing the trumpet. Now I've been playing that a long time now. I started playing that many years ago. And then adding the saxophones now is a whole other, dimension that I love, because, there's stuff you can do on the horn, man, that you can't do on any other instrument, man. And I love the fact that you could play quarter tones or bend a note. And, when you start figuring all those things out, man, and the stuff Johnny Hodges and,
Mm-hmm.
man,
Yeah.
you got all that stuff down. I mean, I know you put some time in, man. But, you could learn all that. You could learn all that, but how it feels when somebody plays is the most important. That's the thing we can't teach. People have to find that,
Yeah, I mean, and personality, right? So everybody's different, and everybody's going to approach things a slightly different way. And even if you try to sound like somebody else, you're still not quite going to sound like them because it's still you doing it. And
well, think about it. Think about how, I mean, Bird, I mean, like, you get speechless when you start to talk about Charlie Parker. I mean, what he set up for us, that's ABC. That's the alphabet, So it's a language. It's just like you try to explain this, sometimes, We're both speaking English. I'm speaking some version of English that I invented, I think, but but like, but we sound different. We phrase different. We sound different. So, well, that whole thing. Well, you listen to that, man. You gotta sound like yourself, and those people that attitudes because they don't want to put the work in to learn all that stuff. I just want to play out, man. That stuff's old. Because you don't want to put the time in. It takes time and effort to learn how to do that.
That's right.
Right? And the cats, the free players, man, that are bad dudes that we love, know all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Pharaoh knows the whole, man, he could play the blues, he could play changes, he knows the tunes, he knows standards, And really, when you start to really get into your thing, we're all free players. That's what you have to get to the point where you're free. Free doesn't mean you just, that doesn't mean free. I know you know that. I'm just saying.
No. I get you.
You pick up your horn, man, or I sit down at the organ, man, and just play,
Yeah.
Because all this information, and then the spiritual connection, man, that's the main element in all of it. That's because that's where it all comes from,
So let me ask you about okay, so we're in quarantine right now, and so theoretically there's more time available, maybe more time to practice or more time to write, or in particular with your practicing, what kind of stuff do you practice, like not stuff that you would suggest that a student practice, but stuff that you yourself, there's this aspect of my playing that I'm still trying to iron out, that I'm still trying to deal with, and so I started practicing these particular things which seemed to be helping with acquiring that skill. And I know that you're playing a lot of saxophone, so maybe a lot of your practice time right now is on saxophone, and that would be cool to throw that in too if you want to.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love this kind of stuff. So my routine is, what I do is I practice all the instruments. So lately I've been starting off with, because I just love it. I think about it, and it's in my head all night and all day, and I'm listening to all the cats because it's like my new thing now. And I've been at it for a year and a half, and I'm figuring some stuff out. So I go in and I start off on the tenor. I put my reed. I've become a serious sax. Like, I'm into it, man. Mouthpieces. I've got like 12 different horns now.
Okay. Everybody that's watching, you have to go to Joey's Instagram, and you'll see the evidence of what he's talking about right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, man, it's so cool. I was excited to do this interview with you too, because another reed man, and all my, Doug Lawrence, that's my man, and we'll get back to him too. But so anyway, my practice routine. So I go in. I get a reed, I put a reed on. I've got like really serious hygiene with my stuff too. Like that's just, I've always kind of been like that.
Yeah. So
I got a mouthpiece and I put everything on and I start playing. And what I'll do is, I'm not going to be one that's going to play long tones and stuff like that. So what I do is I'll play ballads, man, real slow and just hold the notes. So, and essentially I'm playing long tones, right? By doing that.
I see, yeah.
But it's more interesting I enjoy that more. So, and I'll play ballads. I'll go through the whole, I make some of my own backing things, but I also use Jamie Aebersold because there's some great stuff there. You get to play with, Ron Carter and Billy Higgins, and, So I'll start and I'll do that. And I'll do about an hour on the tenor, try to get an hour. And then I pick up the trumpet right after, because I want to be able to go back and forth with no problems. And I've gotten it now. I'm there now. I've got that happening. And then I'll play that for an hour. And sometimes I'll alternate. I'll play one tune and then one tune on the trumpet and one tune you know,
Mm.
and and then I'll sit down on the on the piano, for a minute. I have an electric piano, right? I have all kinds of keyboards. The studio's loaded with stuff, man. It's too much in there. But and then I play the organ, and then I'll go back to. I'll just keep alternating the instruments, and this goes on for a few hours. I might take a break, go back to it. I might walk. I might take the horn outside or something, in the backyard. And I practice like I'm doing tunes, man. And I'll play the head and I'll solo until and that's what I do. You know, for me, that's how I get. It's working for me. I mean, basically, that's how I've always done. When I was a kid, I'd play a blues for 3 hours on the organ, trying different things out. So, and then I write music. I'm working on a new project. Like when I get to it, whenever we get to it. And I've been really into writing original music.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that too during this time. But this practice thing is great because I can not drive people crazy in hotel rooms and people banging on the door. Because I was doing this same stuff when I was on the road. I have my stuff all downloaded and a little, what's the speaker called? A boom,
Yep.
And I do it there. And for the most part, I could get away with it. But, I like to honk, man. I want to get start playing like Sonny Rollins or something, then people start banging on the wall. But but that's how I like to practice, And I've been adding the alto in now too. So I'll go and soprano. I want to try to be able to play all of them, because it's fun, man,
Well, you brought Doug Lawrence up. So you want to talk about Doug a little bit?
I do. Doug's been incredible. See, when we did the gig with the Basie Band, that was February of 2019. Yep. And I started playing the tenor in November of 2018. So I had been playing for about, 3 months.
Right.
And I was, but I know Doug from a long time ago, right? But, he didn't know anything about playing a saxophone or anything. So he's got, his horn and stuff. He said, "Hey, man, how you doing? Like, what's happening?" We did that rehearsal. I said, "Man, I've been playing some tenor." Doug, "Oh, yeah, here, man." He hands me his horn. I'm like, "Oh, man. All right." And I played a couple things. He was like, "Man, that's a good tone, man." And Doug's beautiful, man. He was so encouraging. He gave me a reed case. He gave me reeds.
Yeah.
I got home, I had a package in the mail of like different stuff and the straps and, he knew how excited I was about it. And he also knew that I love Gene Ammons and Dexter Gordon and, the big sound, like I love that's where I love Train too. I love all of it.
Yeah. Right.
But the sound, Gene Ammons, that sound, man, for me, it's and Doug comes out of that, and a lot of cats nowadays are forgetting about those kind of things, and I think it's heartwarming to cats like Doug that somebody understands how important that is, and he just was so helpful, man, just generous and yeah, man. So and plus, man, what a player, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
Great, wonderful musician. Another cat too, and they're good buddies too. Jerry Weldon, you know Jerry?
I don't know Jerry.
He's another tenor player. He plays with Harry Connick's big band.
Okay.
And they're very similar personalities. Real sweet dudes, man, that have huge sounds and so much knowledge and very encouraging. So that was fun, and I had a lot of fun with him, and he's been cool, man. I send him videos and,
Yeah. Doug hooked us up, for
right.
this interview and everything. And, we talked, I think we talked a little bit in his interview about you. And then of course we've talked, on the phone and stuff or whatever. Actually, I don't think we ever talked on the phone. Texted on the phone, and further conversation. After our interview was over, we were talking all kinds of stuff, and then of course the tours that I've been on with him. I'd ask him about you or whatever, and he just lights up. Oh man, it's just like it's like he's a kid, man. He just all he wants to do is just play the horn, and he's just so happy that he can be a resource, and
Yeah,
he's just a really good dude, man.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched the interview you guys did, and that was wonderful. I watched a lot of your interviews, man. They're really,
Thank
really
you.
cool. And that's why I said, yeah, I definitely like to do that. So,
Well, so you mentioned a couple projects, or you hinted at a project. You want to plug anything that
no,
you
not really. I mean, like, you know, I've done. I'm always, man. I hope I need a couple lifetimes. I'm sure you feel the same way to get through all the things that I want to do. You know, but I'm in a mode. My last couple of records were spiritually oriented records. One was called Project Freedom,
Mhm.
and the last one was In the Key of the Universe.
Yeah.
So that's where I am. So I'm going to continue that direction. With original music that has that kind of feel to it, but still blues rooted and grooving and free as far as the way to play, but it's still got that it's that groove to it. Like and that's the music is there's so much great music. I mean, that's been around for a long time. There's so much material, so much wonderful music, and I want to be able to contribute to that in true way I feel, about as to play music, how I feel music. I can't give a false uh, representation of who I am, and I love a lot of different things. I mean, I came up playing. If you're an organ player, man, you got to be able to play the shuffles and the blues and that kind of thing. And I could do that, but that's not all I want to do. And I did so much of that, and that was the difference I think between what I had to offer on the instrument that was maybe a little bit different than what was happening before. Like really change playing and knowing harmony and playing in any key, and that was I think I kind of upped the ante a little bit in that concept to where now all the organ players that have come out of they're kind of like they come out of what I've done now, and that's for me to sit here and say that kind of is like amazing. I can't believe what has happened as far as my influence on the organ world.
Yeah, yeah. Your right hand is ridiculous. I just have to say, man, your right hand is so ridiculous. It's just I don't know how it's possible that you play the stuff that you play with the effortlessness and you and it's all language. Like I mean, there is no BS anywhere, and it's killing.
Oh,
You,
thank you, man.
your right hand is ridiculous. It's
Thank you.
it's totally ridiculous. I mean, that was probably the first thing that I noticed. I'm a very technical player, and and so when I hear stuff that I feel is very precise it's like it's the Sonny Stitt influence on me.
Me
You
too,
know,
man. All of us.
yeah, it's like that clarity and precision, and I just heard all of that in your right hand. I mean, in all of your playing, but your right hand, it's just really it's really ridiculous.
Oh,
Um,
thank you, man. Thank you. And
yeah,
that's funny too because being obviously my dad plays, but he doesn't. my dad has tremendous feeling. You know, his groove is tremendous. He didn't have all that kind of stuff. Like, so I think that's when I was a kid, he would play Oscar Peterson records for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, I want to do that, you know. And Oscar Peterson was a huge influence on me. You know, people like to talk a lot of stuff when it comes down to piano playing and say that, you know, Oscar Peterson, well, he just played like just? First of all, how do you just play like Art Tatum? And he didn't, because he had that, but he had Bud Powell in there. He had the blues. He can go any direction, and it was always perfect and swinging and grooving at the same time, precise. You know, it's like Sonny Stitt, same kind of.
Yep.
They're very, you know, they did that record together.
Yep, I was just about to bring that up. That is, I mean, that's like a top 5 favorite record of all time for me. Top 5. In, okay, so Sonny Stitt. Okay, Sonny Stitt. We know that Sonny Stitt. He would play with anybody, right? He's the most recorded artist of all times.
Yeah.
And it's by far, and it's not even close. Number 2 is not even in the same conversation. Like I'm talking about of artists with recordings in their own name.
Right.
Okay. So it's just totally ridiculous. But part of the way that he did that is he would just play with anybody. Right. And so Stitt always sounded like Stitt, and he was always clear, which is amazing given the varying degrees of quality in the rhythm sections that he would play with, right?
Yeah.
But whenever he would play with an elite rhythm section, then it was totally unfair. And that's what it was like on that that recording.
Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown, and Ed Thigpen, man. I mean, that's, you know, and they were so tight, right? And then you brought somebody like Sonny in. But, you know, some of the organ records are killing too, like the stuff with Don Patterson.
Oh, yeah.
Because Don is one of the unsung heroes of the organ. Don was a change player. Don can play, he could really play, like, and play different than anybody else, you know. And he sounded a little more, you know, I think Sonny Stitt was a big influence on his playing. Mm-hmm. But, you know, Sonny Stitt, man, everybody, when I played with Johnny Griffin said, you know, he would be playing in, Minton's or something, and he was playing, and somebody would say, hey, Johnny, man, Train's here. So, you know, hey, Johnny, Sonny Rollins is here. So, hey, Johnny, Sonny Stitt's here. Oh, man. You know, like, he was the terror, man. Because it was not everything he played was just, you know, on the money. The time was right. The feeling right. You know, the sound, you know, everything was just.
And it all sounded so fresh.
Yeah.
He could be playing the same line, and somehow he was able to channel this thing that just made it sound like it was the first time he played that.
Yeah. When you're talking about things like that, not to get heavy in that way, but that's where it comes from somewhere. That's, you know, it's coming from, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I
put the work in, but the feeling, man.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed, and this is another confirmation of this, you talking about Sonny Stitt's influence on your playing, is that I have not been able to locate a player that has a lot of precision, accuracy, clarity, rhythmic precision, you know, and that's really playing changes, that that Sonny Stitt has not been a primary influence on.
It's impossible.
Like and it doesn't matter the instrument. The instrument doesn't matter.
No, no.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what instrument it is. It's uncanny. I've had conversations with bass players that have that kind of precision. Sonny Stitt.
Oh yeah.
And it's like he's just. It's just like a certain archetype of a certain personality type just gravitates, is just sucked into that vacuum, that Sonny Stitt vacuum, and just can't get out of that.
Yeah, well, Miles used to talk about Sonny all the time.
No.
And he said that he felt like Sonny played that way parallel with Bird. Like that they both were playing that way at the same time. He really believed that. And it could be, man.
It's interesting. That's not you bringing this up is not the first time I've heard this or considered that. So we know Stitt was a little bit younger than Bird.
Yeah.
I think Stitt was born in, was it 26?
That's how.
And Bird was born in 20.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. And but what people say is that Stitt had a bop-like style even prior to having heard Charlie Parker. Now, obviously, that Charlie Parker thing, that's another one of those vacuums that sucks you in and you can't. So obviously, once he did hear Charlie Parker, I'm sure it just solidified and enhanced what it was that Stitt was it clarified even what Stitt was hearing previously. But I totally believe that. And I think that Stitt gets a sort of a bad rap for somehow being some kind of a Charlie Parker clone.
I never thought that though.
Me neither. Me neither.
You could tell them apart in a second.
Right. And maybe the jazz police I might be indicted for saying that what I'm about to say, but Sonny Stitt was a better saxophone player. I know that's like I'm not supposed to say that, and it's like wrong, but he lived longer. He had more time to further refine, right, what it was that he was going to play. Just as far as playing with accuracy, precision, and all of that, I think that he developed that to an extent that Parker didn't have quite enough time to get to because of him dying when he did.
Sure.
And so I think that to be the case, and also, they don't play the same. They totally different identities. Parker is much more emotional, like a bursts of emotion,
Yeah, it's freer. It's a freer kind of thing.
And instead is much more locked in and
Right.
very calculating even, and so precise. I mean, you can't find a bogus Sonny Stitt note. Like
Right.
you can't all the recordings that he did, you can't find something that was like that was a bad note choice
No,
or
it's not.
whatever. And it's not even the thing like what Miles talked about where, don't get so caught up with whatever the note that you're playing currently. The next note is going to be the note that's going to justify or indict you, right? So as long as you have enough flexibility, you can always find a way to get to the right note. But it seems to me like with Stitt, it's like he was never in that circumstance.
Right.
He was always going to play the right notes,
Right. No,
So-
definitely.
It's just really incredible.
But that feeling too. That's talk about that bebop kind of thing. That different way of phrasing and the feeling instead of you know. But Lester Young was playing like that too, though. You
Mm.
know, he really was. I mean, not quite like what Bird wound up doing, but Lester Young was pretty.
Well, I mean, they say that Parker transcribed Lester uh, ferociously.
Makes sense. Makes
Yeah,
sense. And of course, Coleman Hawkins, man. You know,
yeah.
both of those cats. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's so much. There's nothing wrong, and I think it's important to technically have your instrument together. I mean, you know, some cats. I mean, you know, Miles was it was a searcher and was always taking chances, but technically he knew
Oh
that,
yeah.
man, like unbelievably.
Miles went to Juilliard.
Yeah.
See that's something I always feel like when I already know the kind of excuses the person is going to be using that tries to use Miles as some kind of example of someone that, hey, you know, he didn't have a lot of chops, he didn't play with a lot of chops, but you know, but he still was able to play. And they'll try to do the same thing with Thelonious Monk. Oh, you
Right.
know, he didn't have a lot of chops,
Well,
and
they don't know what they really don't know what they don't know what they're talking about.
totally. Um, Monk is on a lot of those uh, Parker recordings, and you swear up and down it's Bud Powell and it's
Absolutely.
Thelonious Monk. If you can sound anywhere near Bud Powell, then you got a lot of chops.
Right.
So that is just that's hogwash. And the same thing with Miles. Miles would be on these recordings, and
Think it's dizzy.
you'd think it's Diz. If you can sound anything like this,
Exactly.
then you got a pile of chops.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and he was even playing like those high notes and stuff. That
Absolutely.
this, it's like, come on, man.
I have to prove cats wrong all the time when they say that stuff. Well, you know, he was. I said, do you understand? He may have, you know, he became a stylist in a certain direction, and he transcended the instrument, but he knew all of that and could do all of that. So he doesn't have to do that if you don't feel like it, you know. But don't misunderstand that you don't have to have your stuff together, you know.
Yeah, you know, it's of players that play at a certain level. I've never heard someone um, I've always heard them say similar things to what you're saying about you know, spending the time, having done your homework, you know, you know, getting the instrument together, you know, it, there's always a lot of talk about that in and about how critically important that is to really being able to say something meaningful, you know, and to pay homage and respect to those that we are representing now that are
Yeah,
no longer with us that we represent. And it's as if we have this great responsibility to, you know, in order to be real ambassadors, to, you know, to not just be able to play the right stuff, but to say the right stuff too, you know.
yeah, definitely. You have to know your stuff, man. I mean, that's stuff. That's the word, right? But you do, man. The thing is when you get into this music, and most people that do, I mean, even as a listener, man, there's some listeners that are very sophisticated. They know what's going on. That's like don't can't play a note on an instrument. But I'm sure you've met some people that really know, man. Like they have ears and you know, they could say and hear things that are, you know, that blows your mind because they don't know the instrument, but
Right.
they understand it. And if you get into this and, you know, it's a very, it takes a lot of, uh, it takes time to figure everything out, to listen, to read about. I mean, you know, you get into a musician and you want to know all the stuff about it. You want to read the books, the autobiographies, the biographies. You know, it's such an interesting art form. I mean, there's a lot of different art forms that are interesting. But there's, of course, this is what I love. So for me, there's so much. You'll never figure everything out. There's so much there. And nowadays, there's an advent. You're a young guy, though. How old are you?
45.
Young guy. I'm only 4 years older than you, so we're young dudes, man. See, but we came up also when we didn't have the internet, and
Right.
like there's I don't want, like, I can't hear excuses now.
Mm-hmm.
There can't be any. You could watch all of these cats we're talking about play.
Right.
We couldn't do that, man. I love it now. You go on YouTube, man, and you can watch Sonny Stitt. The jazz. When I was 2 years old, I went to a concert that I remember it still. I saw the Jazz Giants play, the Giants of Modern Jazz, with Monk, Dizzy, and Art Blakey. They had and I got to see that, man.
Wow.
And yeah, but you could go on YouTube and see that now. There's like when Sonny Stitt was playing in that band, and it's just amazing what's available. And then if you go further back and you think about the cats that we all love, what did they? They had to go to the club to go hear.
That's right.
And then they had to invent it and correct and create these things and make more vocabulary, and it just, goes on and on. And all those players, man, and how they all played different, and even though they're all coming out of the same thing. If you talk to them, they all had the same influence. We have the same influences that they had.
Right.
But we're still carrying, and it keeps coming and keep adding to it. And then whatever music is prevalent from the time that you're growing up too, you throw that all in there too.
Right.
And all that is an influence in whatever is going on in the world too. All of that stuff matters.
You brought something up that I think about this quite a bit, because my students are college students. They're of a totally different mindset and approach to the way that they acquire information. I think the importance or lack of importance that they put on certain kinds of information, even the way that we consume news, right? Which sources we consume it through. You can get it on, major media outlets, but you can also get online and you can find some podcast or something, so there's all kinds of different ways to acquire information. And there's way more information in, there's that thing, do you know it or do you Google know it? and of course, if you Google know it, that means that you don't really know it, but at least you have a skill set that you can figure out which search terms to use. Right. And I suppose that has value, and that is important, because some folks that are our age and older, they struggle with that skill of, well, what's the search term that I should use to find this information that is, ubiquitous. It's all over the place, right?
Right.
But the challenge is because there's so much information and it's so easy to access and it's all free. It's all free.
Free.
Right. I think that what happens is it therefore appears to be less valuable. And since you can get it anytime you want to, you don't have to work for it, it's less likely to be truly valued in the way I think that we came up and the way that we valued things. I think we came up in a time where there was a lot more access to stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't free.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And and you still had to make a commitment. And if you had to lay some dollars down, it's much more likely that you're going to really spend the time with whatever that was, whatever that recording was. It's a challenge. It's a real problem, because being able to access all, I think the way that things have developed with us being able to access all of these concerts and all this stuff on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
I think it mostly, I wish it benefited my students the most, but I think it mostly benefits people about of our age group and maybe a little younger, because we still have that old mindset of really appreciating things because we didn't always have access to it. And
Right.
but then we also have the technology and in the skills to be able to access the information.
Hmm.
And it just it honestly makes me concerned for the for it makes me concerned for my own son, but
Sure.
for college students and younger, it's like, look, you still have to put the time in, because you can access a billion recordings, doesn't mean that it's magically going to get in your playing.
Right. You still have to work at it. I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
I mean, we work on it. I mean, I've been playing for 46 years. And, you never stop working, man, as you know. It's like, and there's so much, there's things that we didn't even know about because of all this access now. There's like the alternate takes of all the stuff that we thought.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, man, I wish I didn't hear some of those. But, it's like all the Kind of Blue when that all came out, and everybody lied how that was all one take. And now you can't lie like that anymore. But you know what? A side subject, I have an iPod that Carlos Santana gave me that has everything Miles ever did, probably 95% of his live performances too of his lifetime.
Wow.
I mean, he researched. Carlos is a Miles fanatic, right? He always was. And he researched and went around and found every bootleg, just everything is on this iPod, man. And I got to hear alternate takes of stuff that still hasn't been released, like from the record Milestones. What was interesting to me on that was Dr. Jekyll was one take, man. They went in there and burned like that perfectly. It makes sense though, right? When you hear that. They played the head once and stopped. That was the only thing, just to check the sound. But those cats went in the studio, counted that off, and just,
Yeah.
and played it.
Yeah, and that's a different. Of course, it's a different kind of thing now, where it takes many more takes, it seems to me, to get something really down right these days than it used to.
Maybe. I mean, my last record, most of the stuff was one take on it, man. I'm a big believer of, as much as I like things to be correct, I still like freshness of like a one take or two takes maximum.
Right.
Because what happens is, it's how something comes out as a whole. Sometimes I'll take something that everybody else played like great on. I might think, wow, I could have played better. But if the thing is right as a whole,
right,
I'm not going to be the one overdubbing my solo 30 times and doing that kind of stuff. If it came out right and I like it as a whole because it's that band, you get that sound as a group, that's my first priority. But then, like somebody, well, man, my solo, I said, well, mine wasn't the best either, and if I go play another one, I have another one, then I got to decide which one. And they're never the same. So I'm just making more work for you. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I think for someone like you, though, you still have that sort of old school mindset.
I do.
And, whereas it seems like a lot of modern artists, it's just a different, I think, paradigm a different thought of, and you know, and I'm not here to criticize anybody. I'm not saying, you know, but well, I do think that less takes is better. I guess I am here to criticize somebody. Less takes is better because of the reasons that you just said.
Yeah.
It's always fresher. For me, it's like, you know, the max I want to do is 3 takes.
Me too.
If I do more than that, then then I'm all in my head and stuff. And it's
Oh
not.
man, yeah. That's 3 is the limit, man.
Yeah.
And I remember when I did my first record, you know, I was a kid. I didn't know, and I signed this big contract with Columbia Records. It was like a big deal. And I was 16, and we went in the studio, and like the producer, we did 3 tracks and takes of everything. That was just how they did stuff. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me. And we wound up using usually the first take or the second take when it came down to it.
Yeah.
Mostly the first take. Because you're excited and man, we're going to play. And especially then, you know. Man, I start getting into my own head too. Man, well, that, you know, and oh, Lord, if you go into the 4th take and, man. You know what I mean?
I actually just did a recording session for not for I was just, you know, playing in a horn section for like some R&B stuff or something, and we did this. So this must have been, that's right. It just, everything seems like so long ago, even stuff that just happened in February, because the world has literally changed overnight.
I know, man. I know.
But so I did this session, and we kept, they were making a mistake. The producer made a mistake, and that was to have us to keep going over the same thing over and over and over.
Oh man.
And what they should have done is they should have said, okay, we're going to do 3 complete takes.
Right.
We're going to keep everything, and then we'll cut stuff up and do whatever we need to do. But so after take 5, take 6, the trumpet player's getting tired. So then they start making mistakes and stuff because they're tired. You know, and then the way that we were mic'd, it wasn't isolated. So whatever the trumpet mistake was, it was getting on everybody's you know, their microphone, so you couldn't get it out of there. So anyhow, the you know, first or second take for me is usually the best also. Well, it's been great talking to you, man. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about, or something you'd like to mention that I didn't ask you?
No, man, I think we covered a lot of stuff. It was a lot of fun, too, to be able to talk about all these different things, man. You know, usually an interview is, where did you grow up? And, you know, and how old were you? You know, like I've answered those questions 2 million times now. So just to have a conversation, talk about, like, I don't get to talk about Sonny Stitt in an interview. You know what I mean? That's great.
Yeah, well, you know, it's been very you know, kind of organic, and we just talking, and you're saying so much stuff that I resonate with, and it just makes me want to ask you stuff about, it's just kind of nerd out on certain aspects of what's going on.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
But I know that you know, things will come around soon, and everybody will be able to play again and get back together. And but we have to be safe. Everybody that's, you know, out there right now, let's do the right things so we can get through this, you know.
Yeah. All right, Joey, thank you so much for your time, your energy. I pray for your family, and I pray for our community. I pray for the day that we can get back on the stage in front of an audience safely.
Thank you. You too, man.
All right now.
All right. Take care, Sean.
Have a good one.
You too.